Well, welcome to the Impactus podcast. I'm Dean Brenton, and we are here to equip you as men for a life of purpose and godly impact. Now, I'm sporting some University of Michigan gear for a special reason today. If you're a football fan, you're going to love this conversation. And if you're not a football fan, you're still going to love this conversation. On January the 8th, the 15-0 undefeated Michigan Wolverines under coach Jim Harbaugh won the U.S. National College Championship at the Rose Bowl, beating the number 2 Washington Huskies 34-13 before a crowd of over 72,000 at the NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas. What a game it was. Some of you may have seen it. Today, we're going to get to have a conversation with one of the key leaders who played a pivotal role in the University of Michigan's triumph at the 2023 College Football National Championship. I was recently connected through a mutual friend to Robby Emery. Robby serves as the assistant to the University of Michigan head football coach. With a remarkable track record, he's contributed significantly to the team's successes over the past 8 seasons that he's been there. Robby is known for his unique and impactful role as a character coach and as a pastor for the University of Michigan football team. His dedication goes way beyond the field in instilling values and ethics and character development in the players that are under his guidance. Robby has not only been with the football team for going on now 9 seasons, but has served as a local pastor for over 20 years. In addition to his professional achievements, Robby is a devoted family man, having been married to Danielle Emery for 25 years. Together, they have built a loving family, and he takes pride in being a father to 3 children, Ava, Bree, and Silas. His commitment to both his family and the football program reflects his passion for fostering success and personal growth in all aspects of life. This is going to be a great conversation. And you know, guys, it's a great privilege to bring you solid biblical and practical content through these podcasts. We'd be really grateful if you would subscribe and share these podcasts and leave us a review on the platform that you use, not for our benefit, but so that we can get more people to experience this great content. And if you would like to support the work of the ministry and these kinds of podcasts, head over to impactus.org/give and consider becoming a monthly partner or making a one-time donation to help us continue this vision to see every man become, grow, and live as a disciple of Jesus. Now, let's get into today's episode. Well, welcome to the Impactus podcast, Robby. It is so good to have you with us.
Hey, it's an honor. Thank you, Dean, for the invitation. And I like your shirt.
I am sporting some swag today. In fact, a friend of mine who was just in the area just brought me this back from the University of Michigan, and I have my hat here just in case. But I had to have a good excuse to wear it today. And my daughter also works at the University of Michigan, but I thought it was totally appropriate for today. So it is so good to have you join
every day.
Absolutely. So first of all, let me say congratulations on the Wolverines' historic win, the national championship. Tell us what that experience was like.
Unlike none other that I've experienced in sports. Been married 25 years. I have 3 kids, twin daughters who are 17, 13-year-old son. And outside of life experiences and my spiritual experiences, there's been none better than that. I guess because, you can watch our story, you can read our story, you can read about the players and the coaches, but, the world knows the adversity we've faced both in and outside of our program. And to have this type of ending, storybook ending, was like no other. And I've learned over the years with the Big Ten championships, you kind of started there, but just really take it in, really embrace the moment that we had. And I caught myself just standing in the corner, watching the confetti, staying in the corner, watching our guys as they celebrate, and really try to pull it all in, because you don't know if you'll ever get back to that moment. And many people spend a lifetime trying to just get there. So I was thankful for it.
It must have been amazing to have a front row seat and to be a part of all that activity, excitement, just the history of all of that. It must have been amazing. Now, we'll come back to this part of the story, but let's back up the train a little bit and talk about your backstory. Like, tell us about your family, how you got involved in ministry, and what led you to the University of Michigan.
It's my favorite story to tell. So started here in Michigan where I live, born and raised. I was a youth pastor right after out of college, right after I got married, and served a local church here for about 9-10 years. And then in 2006, we had our twin daughters, Ava and Bree, and they're just amazing, beautiful girls, going to do great things. Hoping they get into Michigan. They have applied to multiple schools, so that we'll know that at the end of March if they get into college there. And then moved to Houston in 2009. So our girls are just not even 3 years old yet, and was on staff at a multi-site church there in Houston. Still as a youth pastor, but a youth pastor as a multi-site campus, now a youth pastor over other youth pastors. And then after serving there for right at 7 years, my wife and I decided to move back to Michigan to start our church in 2016. And now we have 3 kids, Ava and Bree, which are twins, and then we had a son while we lived in Houston. And so the 5 of us moved back here in 2016 to start a church. And in doing so, we built a relationship. We live in Royal Oak, which is about 45 miles east of Ann Arbor. So we're not close to Ann Arbor. We're closer to Detroit. But when we moved back here, before we even opened the doors of our church, we had a moment where we had a pastor from Houston reach out to us. And he just said, "Hey, we're friends. There's this guy that was going to my church who was the starting quarterback for the University of Houston Cougars, and he transferred to Michigan. And he doesn't know anybody. You're starting a church. Can you just take him in?" And we just started doing Bible studies with him, mentoring him, loving on him. And he wasn't the star that we all know. He wasn't he wasn't even the starting quarterback. He was the third string quarterback. And really, he was what opened up the doors to other families, other players, and then ultimately Coach Harbaugh asking me to be available to, whether it was preaching chapel, being there to mentor the players, being just around the place. I didn't have a position. We all know you don't have to have a position or a title for you to minister and for you to love on people. It's just if you're willing. And Coach Harbaugh, I knew I was willing, and he gave me access. And in giving me access to the players and to the families, I'm now going on my 9th season serving in some capacity at the University of Michigan football program. And there's no limitations in what I've been able to do. What I didn't do is I didn't go in expecting everything. I went in expecting nothing. And now that I win, because I believe that I expected nothing, now I have everything that I would ever want in leadership and access and in, just the faith and belief of not just the head football coach for the program, but the president of the university, the athletic director, the regents of the university. And so the ministry level was not just one layer. It was always going to be, you're reaching the individual. But I believe that, as God said, our Lord said, if you do it to the least of these, you do it as unto me. And there was never it wasn't like, hey, I'm doing Bible studies with the third string quarterback in hopes to get to the starting quarterback. It was just like, I'm just going to love this guy as if he's the only guy to love.
That's incredible. What an open door that God has given you right there to have so much incredible influence. Tell us, like, what does a typical day look like for you, especially when football season's in full swing? But, what does that look like?
It starts early. My goal is to beat the head football coach into the office before he does. Most of those coaches live within 5 minutes of the facility. I live 50 minutes away. So my day starts quite early. Usually the first up in my home, the first out the door, but arrive at the office. And honestly, I would say if you're in any type of full-time ministry, or you're in, maybe you're in, you're bivocational, maybe you go to an office that, those people don't necessarily go to your church. It starts just with walking into the door and trying to be the most positive person, that's in that building that day. And because that's what's attractive. And then they'll fall in love with who you're already in love with. And of course, that's Jesus. But it's really just a mindset. And I think I get 50 minutes a day driving to work. That helps me put in that right mindset to walk into that door and do something. And so we'll do weekly Bible studies with the coaches. I'll have one this week on Thursday. And then we usually do it every Thursday. And I'll do one with the players at a more convenient time with the players and them based on their schedule, because they're in class, right? Their schedules change more often than the coaches would. So we just adapt and adjust and pivot like most and try to make sure we accommodate them. And then I'll offer counsel to the coaches during the week. You know, if there's a player that's struggling, whether it's in athletics or their academics, we'll talk it through. We'll try to get to the root of the problem. You know, what's creating this? And I may have the answer already for them. I just don't know there's a question yet. So I try to stay in front of it. I try to stay in front of anything that these players would face, or trying to be in the world enough that when the coach does ask a question, that I already have an answer for that. And I don't have to go discover new problems or discover the situation, that I'm close enough to it that I already have the answer for them. I'm just waiting for them to come ask the question. Because sometimes it may get to them, sometimes it may not. And I think in a world in the spiritual world, I think sometimes as leaders, we might create drama that doesn't have to be. And so if I go to the coach and be like, hey, just found this out about so-and-so, you know, you might want to be aware of it. Well, that problem may never come out to the where it needs to be addressed by multiple people. It's being remedied by the person that he's already come to and suggested it. And so sometimes we think, oh, we got to over reveal for God to heal. And I don't think so. You know, sometimes you do need multiple opinions, but sometimes that first doctor you went to is probably the only doctor that you need. And so as leaders, I try to make sure that if it's not my story, I'm not sharing it. If that's that student's story, he's going to tell a coach, and he can tell him, and he will. But if it's not my story to tell, if it's not my story that was birthed in me, I don't share it. And so I try to make sure we create a culture of less drama. There's no overseeding, if you will, of certain situations. It's just one that if it does grow to that, then yes, multiple people will get involved. But if not, then I'll handle it. And through the years, the leadership within the program have seen it fixing itself, or Robby handling it, and they're okay with it being done that way. So that's really about every day, just walking in, making sure that I'm available and trying to be this visible, viable component within the organization.
That's so cool. I found a quote by Shmeri Stone, a Fox News anchor. You're probably familiar with it, but she said, and it just kind of captured a little bit of what you do and the impact you're having. But she said, I want to take the time to take University of Michigan, Pastor Robby Emery, for this team's success. This was after the championship. Football is not only a physical game, but it also takes mental and, for many, spiritual strength. Emery has played a big role in making sure our players are ready, and he prays with the team and parents before every game. We parents appreciate you, Pastor Emery, #GoBlue. I thought that just captured so well, right? Like the opportunity you have, because it's multi-layered with parents, with students, with probably faculty and staff. And it's so amazing. So all of those components, of course, become a part of the big family, I guess, to make a championship team. But what do you attribute to the success of the Wolverines this year, and how did they, come through so much adversity this year to win the championship?
Yeah, I think the success is. I actually, when we were talking earlier last week or 2 weeks ago, when we were just kind of talking about just the success of the program and what God's done. I believe that there's this mindset, right? A championship mindset. And I believe Jesus speaks it all throughout his time with his disciples, because he's got to get them ready. Because revival is not because of a man. I believe it's because of a mindset. Like, you succeed because of a mindset. You succeed because of your willingness to get up every day and go. And I believe revival happens in the same way. It's not because of any one person. It's because of that mindset, and that we're going to see God do something great. And in John 14:14, it's something pretty amazing. I love that he shares this, and he says, let not your hearts be troubled. First we have to look at fear, right? When he says that, let not your hearts be troubled, or when an angel appears says, don't be afraid. The first thing you're afraid. And so he says, don't let your hearts be troubled. And, he says, so don't be afraid. And so when the champion mindset is one without fear, one that you're not fearful of outside circumstances. And how do you eliminate fear? Right? Fear is eliminated by trust. That's how you eliminate fear. And I think Craig Rochelle said that fear begins where we trust God the least. So if we trust him the least in our finances, if we trust him the least in our family, all those things we trust. If there's no trust, then that's where fear begins. And so in our program, we have a program of trust. We're going to trust our coaches. We're going to trust our head football coach. And so I try to tell as many people as I can about this. So when everything went down with our head football coach, and I got to serve as his assistant for the past couple of seasons. And so that means I get to sit closest to him, and I get to see things that most people will never get to see. And when there's an investigation on a person and they look in, not into their public lives, but their private lives also. And I'll get to say this, if I knew this prior to this, I'd be more of a fan of Michigan football and Jim Harbaugh than I am already. But I don't know how that can be possible. But they took this man's cell phones, personal, professional, took his computers, took everything. And, we always say this, if, someone's going to go look for something, they might not find what they're looking for, but they'll find something. And they didn't find anything.
Wow.
They didn't find any, horrible spending of finances. They didn't find an illegitimate child in another country. They didn't find anything that would hurt or bring any more detriment to our program. They didn't find what they're looking for, and they didn't find anything else. And so when you create that culture, a culture of trust within any organization, it does remove all fear. It does remove it. And then Jesus says this is what, after in John, he says, now I'm going to go prepare a place for you. I'm going to need you to wait. All right. So the next thing he tells us to do is what we hate as humans, is it says wait, right? Don't be afraid. And then I'm going to need you to wait for it. And man, as in 2016, starting the church, working with football program, all you want to do is win. You just want to win. And we went through some rough patches. We went through, just some, tough years. Losing Ohio State. I don't care if it's your first time or your 10th time. It's the worst. And you go through some rough patches when, those types when you're not winning. But I'll say this to anyone watching, it's when people are not winning, it's probably when they'll need you the most. And it's in those non-winning moments for people, when their business is not winning, when their family is not winning, when their church is not winning, is when you need to just lean in, kind of just buckle up, lean in, and just know that what you do during those moments probably will give you access into moments when they're actually being successful because you stuck it out when they weren't. And I think that's what Jesus was saying. Like, hey, just wait. Better things are coming, but you're going to have to stick through this. And so the 2023 season for me was one of waiting, got to go through all the moments of losing to Georgia in 2021. Oh my gosh. In Miami, literally we're driving home in a bus after the game in Miami, and it's 11:59 and the ball drops, it turns 12 o'clock. And I'm riding in a bus sitting next to my son who's sleeping. We're all sweaty and we just lost. We're celebrating a new year in a bus driving back to a hotel as the first losers in the college football playoff. Then you go to 2022 and everyone expects you to win. Everyone, the world says, oh, TCU has not got a chance. And it's going to be a Georgia Michigan matchup in the championship, or even a Georgia Ohio State. That could be awesome. And everyone's looking for that. And you lose to TCU. And then you're in Phoenix, right? Scottsdale area. You go home and you're watching the Georgia Ohio State game. And as a Michigan fan, you are praying to God that field goal is missed. Because you don't want Ohio State playing in the championship game in a year that you beat them at home, like as a matter of fact. And so there was a lot of waiting. And I'd say to every pastor out there, everyone who's leading and loving people, what I do at Michigan and what I do for our church is none different. It's just we just lean into those moments that are hard, and know that he'll never leave nor forsake. He might say, wait. He might just say, wait for a minute. And, but he's going to prepare a place for you. And the place he's been preparing for us. I mean, it took him just 7 days to make what we have here. I can't imagine. He's been gone 2,000 years. I can't imagine what it's going to look like when we get to eternity.
That's a good point. Such a good life lesson, right? Like, we are not good at waiting. We want everything instantaneous. And sometimes the greatest lessons we learn in life and some of the greatest formative things that God does in our lives are in moments of waiting, when we're in between the now and not yet. He sometimes does his greatest work. Like, tell me how you've grown as a leader, being around like those elite staff members, coaches, and that kind of culture. Like, how have you grown?
Oh, I think, I was a really weird kid, Dean. I was like a weird kid. I'm 14 years old, growing up in a kind of a legalistical type group, but it was good. It gave me a platform to preach on, helped me preach really good, and like become formed in that. But I was a 14-year-old kid praying. So I'm 46. So go back 32 years ago. There's no, readily access to internet. There's definitely not social media. And at 14 years old, I'm praying, God, help me be an influence of influencers. Even at 14 years old, for whatever reason, I understood that I don't have to influence a million people. I just have to influence one person who can influence a million people. And so I just kept on praying that and praying that. I prayed that my whole life. And when social media popped up, I said, now's your chance, God, because this makes more sense now than it did in the 80s and 90s. And so I realized something. Number one is I get to do the greatest thing, and that is share the gospel. I am not intimidated by a billionaire or a social media influencer or a star athlete, because it doesn't matter. It don't matter what they're doing. I'm doing the most important thing, and that's sharing the gospel. Because what profit a man, he gained the whole world, losing his own soul. So I'm doing that. And the other thing I realized is that people of influence, whether it's a head football coach of a Division I football program, or an NFL coach, or a top round draft pick, but these people, they have a lot of fans. They have a lot of followers. They don't have a lot of friends. And so I'll tell everyone that if you're watching this podcast, if you're listening, here's the thing. It's like, as soon as I'm going to grab my phone, as soon as you do this and you want to take a selfie with them, you lose the ability to do this, because this makes you a fan. This makes you a friend. And I can't do this and this at the same time.
That's good.
And so a long time ago, I just chose to do this. And so you may not see a lot of pictures of Robby and people who've come through the program on social media with him. Just never did that, because I chose to be their friend instead of a fan. And I'd say that to everyone out there, whether it's a famous person that everybody knows, or it's a boss or a coworker, a local politician, or anybody, know that they have a lot of fans. They just don't have a lot of friends. And I promise you, if you choose to be a friend, you'll be able to make an impact and influence in their life, and do some great things in building the kingdom for God.
Man, I love that. Yeah, stop being fans, be friends. That's what, man, our world needs that like never before. So you've obviously been around some of those elite athletes, and certainly don't want you to go into any personal stories or anything like that you can't share, but how have you seen God at work in the lives of some of the players and some of your colleagues, other students at the University of Michigan? Like, how have you seen God at work in this generation?
I think there's been a resurgence in a great one, and I think a needed one, of just, there's been people, let's say Blake Corum or JJ McCarthy or Mikey Sanderstill or anyone that you could name over the years that have mentors in their life. So other NFL athletes or professional people who've had great success. What I think we've seen is those type of people have been open in their faith. Whether it's Patrick Mahomes talking about he has a tattoo on his body, and the tattoo on his body is from Scripture, and the reason why it's not there from Scripture, it's I believe it's Eutychus, when Eutychus fell from the window, and that's the story that's tattooed on him. It's reason for him, and so he doesn't fall asleep and to a demise, you know. And I love it. If I could have Patrick Mahomes and talk to him, I said I'd love that scripture. I said Eutychus' problem wasn't that he fell asleep. Wasn't that he fell asleep, because I fall asleep every day, and I enjoy it. I love it. And even the Bible says it was late. The problem wasn't that he fell asleep. The problem was where he fell asleep at.
It's true.
And it's not, and I tell this, that's why I try to speak to this generation. It's not where you fall asleep. It's where you fall asleep at. He fell asleep in a window, not a good spot. You fell out. It's going to be your demise. Oh, sorry about that. And I would say this, and I'd say this for them. It's like, you know, it's bringing the gospel to them in a way that they understand. It wasn't the problem falling asleep. It was where he fell asleep at. And so having Patrick Mahomes and these other men and women being on a platform that they want to get to, not ashamed of the gospel, not ashamed of their faith, and not ashamed to have it all together, right? And I think that's the thing. We think we have to have it all together to be able to proclaim our faith in Jesus Christ. And I think the fact that we don't, and we're actually still proclaiming it, is actually even better than being like, I'm perfect, have it all together, follow me, all these things. When in reality, most of us don't. None of us do. And I think that's really been a key to like guys like that I'm around to be able to proclaim their faith. And, you know, for my head football coach, which I love, and now he's in LA. I mean, when he asked me to fly to DC in January for the Right for Life march, I was like, yes, let's go. Sign me up. I'm there with you, coach. We'll go. I said, it's going to be a little crazy with you marching in it, but might as well.
That is so amazing. What a great truth, right? It's not about falling asleep. It's where you fall asleep. And
yeah.
So kind of it leads to another question, just in terms of, you know, I mean, you're working on a secular campus at a major university in the United States. And some would assume, you know, well, you know, the gospel, it must be hard to present the gospel. But I think if I hear you right, there's a real openness that you're seeing to the gospel. And there are lots of open doors to share faith in a setting like that. Yeah, there really is. And I think it's I tell people, don't mistake my meekness for weakness. But I also think it's the way we sometimes go about the gospel. And I have teenagers. All three of my kids are teenagers, so you need to pray for me. And two of them are girls, so really, really, really pray for me. But I think, and I always tell my teenagers, like, it's not in what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. I said, you need to watch your tone with me. What you're saying is not wrong, but how you're saying it and the way you're saying it is 100% wrong. And I think some of us, in presenting the gospel, maybe it's not what we're saying, but it's the tone in which we're presenting it. Wow. Yeah.
That makes leaders of large organizations turned off from it. And I think that's it. And I think the way that my wife and I have chosen, it's not a megaphone type mentality. It's a very one-on-one, very meek, very not in your face. Jesus is the light of the world, and he said we are, which is, wow, that's a big deal. Like, you are, and then I am. And I think sometimes it's like we think because we're the light of the world that we need to shine light in the faces of those who need to see the light of Jesus. And it's not the case, because if I shine a light in your face, Dean, the first thing you do is you turn away because it's too bright. It's in your face. Mm-hmm. I need to shine a light on a path, right? A path, and so they can take some steps toward the greater good. And that's all we've done. We've not done anything. I think because we don't post a whole lot. It's not flashy. We're not trying to get a picture. We're actually doing it for the purpose of ministry and not, a personal come up. And that's all I can say. And that's honestly the truth. It's always been that. And I have friends who have known me for, a long time, and even know me through this. And they're like, you need to post more. You need to share more. You need to talk more about what you're doing. I'm like, that's okay. I'm good with that. I would rather if the players want to do it, and they do post, JJ will post about his baptism, Blake will post about his faith. Mikey, I had the privilege of baptizing Mikey Sanders still, and 70 players have been baptized over the 8 seasons. Over 240 have given their life to Christ.
Wow.
Been married 8 players and coaches over the years. So it's not just one level of leadership. It's
Mm-hmm.
trying to be that church, if you will, without the building, to the entire team.
I've noticed that about your social media. I've checked it out a little bit just as I was getting to know you, and there is a real meekness to that, right? And I really appreciate it, because some people would be really drawn to getting the selfies and getting the the influencers and getting them on their feeds and all those things. But
there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think. And again, I think that there's people out there to do it, and they're really successful at it. And then sometimes I wish I could be more like them, but I'm just thinking, and for me this season, for what we've been able to do, it just fits us, and I think it's a part of the the benefit and success we've seen.
I think so. I can kind of sense that servant, humility that's all over your life and ministry. It's obviously bearing fruit and giving you some really pretty incredible open doors. How do you handle, there must be a bit of a revolving door. Some of the players you've grown so close to will move on now to careers and other things. And you'll bring in a whole new crop of students. And so there must be some major highs and lows and difficult moments. How do you navigate that as a pastor, leader, mentor?
That's probably the toughest part, Dean. That's a great question. It's probably the most difficult. Coach Harbaugh now moved to LA.
Yeah.
And so I've been back in Michigan 8 years, and I told my wife, I feel like I'm losing a family member. I'm losing a best friend, as I'm not going to see him every day. I'm not going to talk to him every day. Not going to have, you think about it. I've seen him every day just about for 8 years. I don't know, outside of the people who live in my house, I don't know of anyone I've seen every day for 8 years. And so it is hard. It's hard because you're some of our students, they come in at 17 years old. They're just graduated halfway through their senior year, and they're 17, and they leave, and they're 22, 23 years old. And you spent a good portion of their developmental years alongside of them. So you've got to help shape them. And we always talk about, we don't want to be a transactional school. We want to be a transformational one. And, you'll know if we've done a good job, not if we win a championship, but if in 20 years, these are good men, good husbands, and good, advocates for their community. We'll know if we've done our job then. And so, yeah, it's cyclical with coaches, cyclical with players. And so you just have to have a mindset of, you're going to love them, you're going to lead them, you're going to let them go. And then you're going to try to stay in contact with them as much as you can. There's a few weddings I'll have coming up in a few years. There's a few things I'll keep going. And I know if anything ever comes about, or if I ever want to go to a game, I can go to just about any NFL game out there. I've got a player on every team. There's not many doors that I couldn't knock on that wouldn't open up for us to be able to see them and check on them and love on them, and to know that. And so, hey, we're looking for the draft. The NFL draft was right here in Detroit this year, so we're excited about that. So we had 18 guys go to the combine. We could have 18 plus guys get drafted. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So we just celebrate them, right? We're just going to celebrate their next in their life, just as you would a pastor. And just as a pastor would do, you would never prevent somebody from going on to what's better for them. You always would just encourage them and push them. And we're doing that. We do that with our coaches and our players. And there's been some people over the years that have stuck around and been able to build some good relationship with. And sometimes you get a player that they're there 7 years or so, which is kind of fun. They get to be around there for 6 years or so. One was Andrew Vastardis, who was on our 2021 team. And so he helped us win our first Big Ten championship in like 20 years. And then went on to perform his wedding that following year. So he's now in med school and going to be a doctor somewhere. And I told Andrew, I said, I've seen how you play football and I've seen you most of your life. I said, I'm going to get a referral from you or go see get a second opinion if I ever come to you. I know you can hike a football, but I'm not sure you can wield a scalpel.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, those moments change, right? Like, and it's part of life. We navigate difficult seasons, and people, things change, but relationships will last if they're genuine. And obviously, God never changes through all that, and He continues to use us in those seasons. I think all our audience are officially jealous that you could access most any NFL game with tickets. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you're looking at obviously a brand new football season and a whole new, probably not a whole new team, but new players and all those things. So as you look into 2024, what are your hopes for this year for the team and for yourself as you lead?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that coming into it, right? So this is our first season going into, this will be my first season going into that we're national champions. So we've never done that, right? So there's every year we've been here, there's always been something to accomplish, something to cross off the board, something to reach. And so now, hanging on some of the words of as a Andy Reid or a Bill Belichick, NFL coaches who've won multiple Super Bowls. And how do they get them back there? How do they keep that championship mindset and not, becoming mundane and just, oh, we've been there. This is who we are. This is how we do it. And so we're looking into that. We're trying to make sure we develop a culture that is not, doesn't settle and doesn't, kind of fall back on what we've been, but strive and push. And so one of the things I've talked to one of our players already. He's one of our veteran players and could have gone into, the NFL possibly, but understood that his next, maybe sticking around a little longer could benefit him some in doing that. And so he has to take on the younger team, the new players, the new coaches, all the things, the nuances of this 2024 team. And I told him this, I said, if you always look on what you did have, you'll never see the opportunity that's in front of you. You'll never see the possibility in front of you. And I said, it won't be the same. You have to look at it different. Last year, you won a national championship. This year, you can lead them to a national championship. Last year, you were just on the team. This year, you can be a leader on the team. And you can make new friends. You can love on new people. I think sometimes, we were missing out on great opportunity because whether we put God in a box or we say, hey, this is the only way God can operate because this is the way God always operates. And so we sit in the same seat at church or we go to the same worship place around the altars because that's where God did it last time. That's where God's going to do it again. And we kind of fall into that same place. And you read scripture, that's what happens. They're like, hey, do I have to go to this mountain to worship or this mountain worship? Or I have to go here. And this is where God pours out his blessing. This is where God does it. And I think this year as I'm walking into something brand new and excited because now I get to see God operate on this side of a national championship, seeing what we can do with this mindset and how we can become better. Otherwise, you get stuck in what was and you never get to experience what could be. And so that's what we're leaning into this year.
Oh, I love that. So before we finish up, put on your pastor hat again for a moment. And so you got a lot of guys who are listening and watching this podcast, and they may not be, elite athletes or, coaching or anything like that, but they have opportunities to be an influencer and to have that kind of mindset. Like, how would you challenge them today? How would you challenge them to step up in this new season for their lives?
I would challenge just to be bold and unapologetic for who you are and what you get to do everywhere you go. It's who you are, and so be that person. One of the things we started our church here in 2016, and of course, as a church planner, it doesn't matter. You want everyone with breath in their lungs to come to church on a Sunday. So you don't care who they are, where they come from, or their story. You just want them to be there in person. And one of the things I used to always do, and I still do it, is always invite people to church as if I'm the person that sits in the church next to them, not as the pastor. I invite them as like, hey, come to church. I'm like, the preaching is really good. But I tell them, I invite them as a person sitting next to me, not the person standing in front of them. And I think as leaders, I think that's what Jesus did. I think he invited people to, come stand next to me, not in front of me. And I think that's another mindset that we need to have in 2024 is that he doesn't need us to stand up for him. He just needs us to stand with him.
Mm.
And sometimes when we stand up for Jesus is when I get in front of him and the only thing that people can see is Robby and not Jesus. And so I just need to stand with him and make sure I don't get in his way. Because I'll say this is something that's really cool in the Bible. You guys can study it. When Jesus went to his best friend who had passed, Lazarus, and he knew what he was going to do. The Bible said he knew what he was going to do, but it took him some time to do it. And when Lazarus was raised from the dead, there was people there that are watching. And they said this most incredible words in the Word of God. The Pharisee said, if we leave him alone, talking about Jesus, all men will believe on him. So from that day forward, they started getting in the way of Jesus. Because they even understood. If we allow him, if we leave him alone, all men are going to believe. And I'll say this, let's leave Jesus alone. Let's leave him alone. Let's get out of his way. Let's leave him alone because all men will believe, because the reason why men don't believe, it has nothing to do with Jesus. It has everything to do with me. And so what I try to do is let's get out of the way of him. I'm unapologetic. It's just the gospel, him crucified, loving on people. And I'll say this, if you're ever in a setting and they know who you are, they know you're a pastor, they know you're a leader, they know you're spirit filled, they know that you're a type of person, be that person. I'll tell people all the time, they ask me, what do you talk about in chapel service? I just give them Jesus. What do you talk about when you're playing? Just give them Jesus. I said, they're going to hear from Michael Jordan. They're going to hear from Tom Brady. They're going to hear from Jeff Bezos. They're going to hear from the most elite athlete and businessman in the world. They don't need for me to pump them up. They need for me to give them Jesus.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I would say the same for you. Everywhere you go, just do that and just trust him to pave the way. And whatever that way is, it's a fun journey. I'll tell you that.
No, that's good. Get out of the way and let Jesus be Jesus. There's a sermon in there somewhere. That's good, man.
Go preach it. Hey, I'm going to tell people, if my bullet fits your gun, go ahead and shoot it. It's all good with me. I know Sunday's coming. Go ahead and preach it.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You said something earlier too about the culture of the school, just not being transactional, but being transformational. I love that. And I think that can apply to organizations, to churches, but to us as individuals as well, that we live to get out of the way so that we can actually be a transformational person no matter where we are. And that's such a great truth, kind of to end the conversation today. But before we finish up, we didn't practice for this or anything, but I got a little speed round if you're up for it. If not, we can edit it out later. But
let's go. Yeah.
Just five simple questions to just to get to know you a little better before we finish. Ready?
Yeah, good.
All right, let's do it. Favorite sport outside of football?
Golf.
Oh, okay. All right. Favorite way to recharge your batteries, your own personal batteries, hobby or
work out at the gym.
Okay, cool. The most impactful book you've read in the past year?
I reread it, so I'm just going to say this. Speak Like Churchill, Stand Like Lincoln.
Okay.
James is the author.
Cool.
Any pastor out there, go get that book, because if you're looking for little nuggets to add into your sermons, there'll be some nuggets in there from Churchill and Lincoln.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Favorite passage of scripture, kind of your life verse or go-to passage, what is it?
Psalms 31:24, be brave, be strong, and never give up. I prayed over every player and the coaches before every game.
That's good. That's good. And last question, if you could meet one Bible character for coffee, not Jesus, who would it be?
David, King David. I want to meet him for coffee.
I love it. I love it. And which coffee shop would it be in Ann Arbor?
Oh, man, I don't know where it would be.
Okay.
There's a new spot I've been wanting to try. So if it's David, let's go try this. David, it's called The Drip. So we go there. It's right next to the big house. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I asked that for a selfish reason too, because one of these days you and I'll have to do that in Ann Arbor.
Yes, we will. There's one right next to the big house, right in the corner of Stadium in Maine. So we should hit that up.
I've driven by that a few times and I've wanted to go in, so that'll be an excuse.
Big white building, beautiful, real cool.
It's fantastic. Robby, where can people get more information about what you do or follow you on social memery? Where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to, it's just Robby Emery at all social media platforms, ROBBYEMERY. You can email me if you'd like, robbyemery@me.com. That's robbyemery@me.com. And yeah, just if you'd like to know more, hit me up, follow me on social media, email me. I promise I'll email you back. It's not some bot or somebody doing it. That's me. Now, if you email Jim Harbaugh, it's probably me emailing you back. But it'll be me. I'd love to connect any way that I can. I hope this podcast, and I hope it's been helpful to you. I hope it's encouraged you, and let you know that God is doing some great things across the world and in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Well, Robby, thanks for taking time today. It is so cool to hear your story, to hear how God's been using you right there in such a strategic and an important place. And just I'll also encourage our listeners just to be an influencer, to let God use them wherever they find themselves today. So thank you for being with us, and look forward to connecting again real soon.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Thank you again for the invitation, Dean. And God bless you, man. Thank you to all your team and everyone you're leading. God bless you guys. And I believe 2024 is going to be a big win for the kingdom of God.
I love it. And for the Wolverines as well. Amen. God bless you.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.